This evening on the Newman Show, a powerful story of betrayal, healing, and survival. When Adenike Harris was a child, she was sexually abused by her stepfather. Hers is a remarkable story of recovery that led her to do a healing TEDx talk with her real dad. That's coming up right now on the Newman Show. Welcome to the Newman Show from the campus of historic Howard University, right here in the nation's capital. I'm Newman, and it is my desire to inspire you with personal stories of extraordinary achievement. According to the U.S. Justice Department, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 7 boys will be sexually abused in their lifetime. In addition, 90% of child sexual abuse victims know their attackers. Tonight, we meet Adenike Harris and her father, Peter J. Harris, an extraordinary father and daughter team who took the high road after she'd been sexually abused by her stepfather. It's a story of healing and recovery versus retaliation and revenge. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today, both of you.
Thank you.
As a bit of a disclaimer, I want to share with my audience that I know this family. Peter J. Harris is the younger brother of Glenn Harris and Ron Harris. We were all teammates on the same baseball teams, including here at Howard University. Adenike is the daughter. So I know this family, and I knew something about this story. Didn't know as many details as I know now. But it was a TED Talk that they recently did. The TED Talk is about 21 minutes, and we have a clip from it that I want to show you. And I would encourage each of you to watch it in its full length. Let's take a look.
When I was 28 years old, I felt called to Los Angeles to be near my father, who had been living there the majority of my life. I asked him to come to Atlanta so we could take a road trip. We packed up my 2003 Honda Civic, including my favorite stuffed animal, Honey Bear, and started driving. Pops had this idea to make the trip educational. First stop, the Civil Rights Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama. From Montgomery, we went to the George Washington Carver Museum at Tuskegee University. There, we rediscovered Pops' love for the multiple uses of the peanut, starting with eating them all the time. Next stop, Pensacola, Florida, because wherever we are, there must be water, and the Gulf of Mexico was calling our name.
We drove and laughed and cried. We exchanged our biggest ideas for the future, all witnessed by little brother Honey Bear in the back seat. Somewhere driving the never-ending road through Texas, and while jamming to the dance floor mix of Let's Groove Tonight, I must have entered a trance, and like a Southeast DC oracle, I told my daughter, "You've reclaimed your life, Adenike. Now live your life. It's your time to victorize the situation." At first, though, she said,
Pops, you do know victorize is not a word, right?
Yeah, but then the poetry sunk in, and we both realized it means squeezing victory out of a negative situation, creating your own path, living your life in power on your own terms. Victorize.
Yeah, that was just like my pops to help me reframe a terrible experience I had. When I was 14 years old, my stepfather violated my innocence with sexual touching, and at 16 years old, he raped me and clouded the violation under some sick predatory guise of preparation for my teenage sexual years. He continued the sexual thievery until I turned 22. But I'm happy to say that my real father, this dude right here, became an integral part of my healing. Instead of shutting down and turning away from each other, we chose to turn towards each other. We chose to be well. We started what I now call my journey of reclamation. I started by telling my family about my stepfather. Understandably, they were upset, yet I immediately directed them not to retaliate.
Yeah, and you best believe I plan to retaliate.
My God. Honey Bear. That was 8 years ago when you took off on that journey from Atlanta.
Yeah.
Is Honey Bear still around?
Honey Bear is still around. Honey Bear is actually at my apartment right now, chilling in LA.
Tell me what Honey Bear has meant to you how long have you had Honey Bear?
I've had Honey Bear probably since I was 14, 15. My mom gave him to me. It's probably my favorite stuffed animal. I think it was the last gift that my mother gave me before my sexual abuse started. And I think I just held on to it as a attachment to that innocence that was taken from me. And so I just keep him. Now he's my homie.
Yeah, main man.
Yeah, it's my main man. He sits at the house. He sits in the car sometimes if I need him to. But literally, it's the only stuffed animal that I have not been able to release or give away. Yeah.
You know, that is very interesting that you say that was a gift. That is something that is a reminder of the innocence that existed before that innocence was violated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The innocence, Pete, that was violated. We talked offline, and your first reaction probably would be the reaction of most men, knowing that their precious daughter had been violated by a criminal. Your first reaction was one of revenge and interest in trying to find a way to kill this guy. You've explained that. What was it, and how did Adenike, at her 22-year-old self, how did she take you away from those natural instincts and help bring you into her healing process?
Dad, I don't want you to do nothing. That's what she wrote. I was 3,000 miles away in LA. She was in Maryland. And that's the thing she wrote me in an email. She says, I don't want you to do nothing. I want you to be my dad. You are my father. You are my real dad. That's it. I have that email tattooed in my third eye.
Yeah.
And she just sort of broke this kind of deep circuit with just telling me it's really all about her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's not about me. Mm-hmm. I have my righteous reaction, my righteousness in terms of this particular dude who shook my hand. You know, later on in the talk, I talk about how the violation ripples out because as it relates to me, I'm talking about another African-American man. I'm saying it as plain as that.
Yeah.
This guy shook my hand when he married his Adenike's mom.
Yeah.
He says, look, you ain't got to worry about me, man. I'm your ally. You know, blah, 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 blah. And he fooled Glenn and them, shook Glenn's in them hand. We all came, we would come to her track meets and whatnot. So the real reason I can sit here today and you're not interviewing me from Lorton or somewhere. I don't even know if Lorton is still open now.
You've been out west a long
Long
time.
time,
Lorton's
Lorton.
been gone for a minute.
What I'm saying,
Yeah,
the
in
reason
penitentiary.
you're not interviewing me from the penitentiary is because of her. She said, "Pops, let's live the rest of our lives." And frankly, it just made so much sense. I haven't gotten over it.
Yeah.
I can see the dude, I don't want to see the cat. There is no namaste forgiveness for this dude. Let's get that real.
Yeah.
But the real focus is on
Yeah.
her and what we built as a way to heal our family, break all those other negative circuits, and really dig in and be able to do stuff like this.
So Adenike, I want to stay right at that time when your dad became aware and you sent him that email that's etched forever in his third eye. Where did that come from that you took the tack with your dad, knowing what his natural reaction might be, that you wanted to start the process of peace out of what was a horrific experience?
At 38, I can say it was more of a spiritual, it was a God thing, right? But at 22, I don't have an answer as to why that was my first reaction. What I did know was when I told my mother, I knew we had to go home. And I was like, I don't want to go home with this rage that is in my mom, right?
He was still there?
He was still there.
Okay.
Expectation of us coming home from church was there. He had actually been calling my mom. It was their anniversary. So this particular individual was waiting for us.
Yeah.
And I had just told my mother this, gave her the full disclosure, told her everything. We were in a safe space. We were surrounded by people who we knew loved us. But when I got to tell Dad, sending that email, I actually only told him because my brother told him first. Because I wasn't ready to tell him. I knew the possibility of like him getting on an airplane, calling Uncle Glenn, calling Uncle Ron and everybody. And I was like, I don't want that right now.
Yeah.
But when I knew my brother had driven up from Miami at the time to come to DC, 17 hours straight, that man, my big brother got in that car and drove all the way up here nonstop.
Yeah.
When I knew he would do that,
Yeah.
I knew he was gonna get on a plane. And it made sense to me, like, take a beat.
Yeah.
Tell him to stay where he is. Don't do anything yet. What I wanted first was safety for me and Mom, get this man in jail. And then within 24 hours, that happened.
Yeah.
Where did the fortitude come from?
Okay.
It was an innate thing, yeah.
So this abuse started with you at at 14 years old, and we're now talking about 22, and I want to just stay there for a moment because at some point you had to make a decision to tell someone, to tell your mom. Was there a seminal moment or something that happened that triggered, that made you say, this is the time for me to tell? Was it an incident with him, or was it just a culmination of this time that you couldn't live in this prison anymore?
I want to say it's a combination. The incidents had been leading up since I turned 18, because when I turned 18, it went from kind of insecure, like I don't know what to do, feeling of control, to enraged, right? And I was like, all right, you touch me again, I'm gonna kill you. Like we were fighting all the time verbally in my home.
Yeah.
By the time I got to 22, it was something in me like I needed more. I graduated college, I had to move back home when he was still in the house. And I was like, this is not the life I wanna live. I can't do this anymore. I also began to observe the disconnect between my mom and I, which was also a really big deal because I never felt like my mom wouldn't believe me, but I also felt like I didn't know her because he had wedged the building blocks. He had wedged the relationship between me and my mother. He wouldn't allow us to really get to know each other as a young woman, me growing up. Any questions I had about dating, he would always like find a way to be the one to give me answers. He really, really psychologically abused my mom, made her feel worthless. So she released a lot of her own power, which, totally different TED Talk and conversation.
Yeah.
But the moment that really, really transformed me was just a day of waking up saying, I want my mother back. And I started to do weekends in DC with her, go to church with her, go to museums with her. And as I built that relationship and I started to hear the things that he would say to her about me, that she had questions, but was really afraid to talk to me, I realized how much this man had been manipulating both of us. And also I was dating someone and I wanted to have a clean, free, emotional relationship with a man where I didn't feel like I was lying.
Yeah.
And as I was dating him, I started going to therapy. And then with my therapist, she built up the resolve in me, and then I finally just told her.
Yeah.
So.
You know, there is so often the seminal question asked, which so often illustrates people's lack of understanding of this kind of violation. And that is, and they do it sometimes in absolute innocence. And that question is, that they ask, is why didn't you tell someone sooner? And that almost starts to make the victim responsible in some kind of way, which is a form of insanity. But for those who are watching this show now, who are learning from your experience, questioning whether or not they should tell, what would you say is the reason you didn't say something earlier, and what do you say those who are trying to find their way out of this kind of horror?
One of the reasons that my dad and I, we discussed that answer when I wrote my master's thesis. We had begun this conversation when I went to grad school. But I realized the reason why at 14, when it first happened to me, I didn't tell, was because I was in a space where I felt like I would be breaking up a household. I felt fear. I felt my own shame, like it was my fault, like I did something, no better now. But I do feel that all victims of some type of sexual assault or abuse feel that shame, that guilt. What did I do? Even if you're a little girl, even if you're completely innocent, which I believe everyone who has been assaulted and something sexual has happened to them against their will, there's an innocence there. You didn't do anything. My reasons for not telling for the remainder was because I was in a home where, point blank, my dad wasn't there. He lived 3,000 miles away. My mom gets remarried. Everybody looks happy. Do I want to be the kid that breaks up happiness?
Oh, Lord,
And I didn't know how to navigate. I'm 14, 15 years old. I don't know how to navigate those emotions, those feelings of shame. And even though Dad and I had built an amazing relationship as far as conversation, it was still distance.
Sure.
He wasn't there.
I remember when he asked me point blank, was I having sex? And I was, I think, what, 17? 17. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no. Right. Knowing that that was an ideal moment in hindsight, like, this is the time.
Yeah.
You are 3,000 miles away from your perpetrator. Yeah. You are safe. You are with sister aunties. You are in a loving environment with this man. Yeah. I still didn't tell because of fear, of shame. By this time, I'm 17. Right. I'd been enduring it. In my mind, I was handling it. I got this, whatever. Uh-huh. You just have to navigate that. But what I will say to anyone who is in the midst of that, you have to find the people that you really trust. And this is what I talk about as a non-abusive loved one. Yeah. Every survivor inevitably finds the first person that they tell. And that person holds characteristics of safety, of honesty, like trustworthiness. Yeah. You can look at that person, you know that person is someone that, it could be a therapist, it could be a friend. I've said in my TED Talk, it was about, it could be a coworker. Yeah. You know, and even if you are an adult and haven't experienced the healing that comes from your testimony, you start there. You start with someone who listens to you, that has created the foundation of like honesty. They're not just like, oh girl, we should go and do this. It's really about finding
someone who helps you dig into the places that are uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but holds you up and then
Yeah.
holds you like, all right, we were here. Let's move forward. Let's
Yeah.
move through that.
Yeah.
But I can't tell anyone how to tell. I can't tell anyone how,
Yeah.
but I do emphasize the importance of telling.
Pete, let me ask you, man, what did this do to you in terms of making you second guess life decisions that you made? I can only imagine that
absolutely.
you must have had a ping pong match.
Sure. I mean, you know, I'm, as I always tell people, I stand with her, but I'm no knight in shining armor. I'm just a hard-working dude from Southeast who works hard at becoming a better man.
Yeah.
Sure. Among other things, you know, I was living in the D.C. region in the '80s, and I was with my second wife.
Yeah.
We were here. It didn't quite work itself out, and we came to the decision to leave again. And I struggled even then, but eventually I decided to leave. I tried to change.
Struggled with leaving because your kids were here.
Yeah, they were here.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I'd already lived in the Bay Area where I met my second wife, and we'd come back. So I was saying to myself, well, wait a minute, if I leave, we got this great little flow. I had them every summer. I would learn how to braid her hair. You know what I mean? So we'd take our little trips, and I'd be like zappity wappity, you know, making sure that they look good to me. The hairstyles look good to me.
It was all jacked
But
up.
it was tough.
I
It was
remember
like
seeing
this,
it one
man. It
time.
was like, oh,
Right.
man. But I didn't even know how to put a beret on. But and my parts was all like this. But I said, we finally found this thing. It wasn't
Yeah.
perfect,
Yeah.
you know. But so I said, let's go. But I finally decided we're gonna leave, but they're gonna drive across country with me. So I guess Honda's running the family because I had a Honda
Yeah, the Honda
Civic
hatchback.
hatchback, a '91,
Yeah.
which actually had way more room than I thought. So we hit the road.
Yeah,
I got her and her brother, and we just make a big old road trip out of it. And my goal at least was to bond us, to make sure that even though at the end of the summer they were going to come back and be with moms here in Maryland, that we could still be tight enough to where if there were things that would spike up, because every time I got them, day one ritual, we go get a pizza, we sit around, and I say, what's happening in the house? I'm not trying to get in your mom's business, but who's in the house? What's going on?
Yeah.
Obviously, when it came to testifying about this particular violation, we just hadn't quite built it. But obviously my biggest regret was leaving, was physically getting away. Because I am 100% sure that had I stayed here in the region in the 80s and let them move on through this new reality, summers with Pops, geographical intimacy so they could come and visit at any time.
Sure.
Because she would do that. She would pick up the phone and say, all right, man, I need to come on over. I know we would have broke all circuits of silence early.
Yeah.
So it's a regret. It's a deep regret, of course.
Yeah. So Pete, she asked you to not seek revenge, help her seek recovery.
Absolutely.
So
that's a great way to say that.
What would you say to the dad, to the father in your shoes who hears this story and has the same reaction that you had? Looking in here tonight, you hear that story, you want to take somebody's head off and put their body over there. And you would say to your brothers out there, what?
Be human. Feel everything. So that's a righteous stance to have. Revenge, retaliation. But look at yourself first. Look at your family dynamics. I'm not saying ask yourself what role did I play in this violation. That's not anybody's fault but the perpetrator, but the predator. But I would say, what is it what have you always been trying to do? Because as you said at the opening, 90% of young people who get hurt are hurt by somebody they know.
That they know.
You know what I'm saying? So the key is, what kind of households are we building? You know, she's taught me this concept of how do you sort of deal non-abusively when you're an ally.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So you can't be a non-abusive ally talking about going hurting somebody and killing somebody. And in fact, what are you really also responding to? Your rep.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Your manhood.
It's really your manhood, you know.
Yeah.
And so is that the only way you can be a man? I think I'm a way better dude standing beside her going for the next 40 plus years. That's my hope. I eat broccoli and tofu for that purpose. But I think I'm much more of a man walking arm in arm with her into this future than I am getting the endorphin dump that will come from righteous revenge. A butt whipping or whatever other thing we can bring into the reality. All we gotta do is make a couple of calls, or maybe not calls these days, especially not in this area. Somebody's listening probably, but you get with your people and you say, bop, bop, bip, whoop, bop, bop, who can I call, whip, what, what.
So there's much more to talk about here. But let's kind of stay more with the current time. You guys did that TED Talk 3 weeks ago, a month ago.
We were on the stage officially on September 22nd.
Okay.
And then it just went live on TEDx's YouTube page November 1st. Yes.
Okay. All right. And so tell me about the journey to get there. What did you all do that put you in a position, because not everybody can do a TED Talk. You know, you got to be bringing something to the table. And so you guys did a lot. I sure want to go back, not right now. I just want to talk about this TED Talk thing and how that came about. But I want to go back to your leaving Atlanta and going cross country. But let's talk about how did this TED Talk thing come about?
So it literally is just about being in the right place at the right time. So I started to do some volunteer work, and someone said, hey, at Pasadena City College and Community College in Pasadena, they're doing a workshop. They're going to teach you how to become a TED speaker. I'm like, okay.
And I was back here at that time.
Yeah,
I was up back
you
here.
weren't even in LA.
And Glenn was having his surgery, and I was back there for that.
And I showed up. I observed, I listened, I met the woman who is the executive director of TEDx Pasadena, learned all the information about TED, which I didn't know. It's as an organization, what TEDx even stands for. And I'm like, oh, this is way bigger than I thought. It's not just speaker, right? Then the ultimate question, she said, who wants to do a TED Talk? So I was like, of course, you know? And she gave us like 2 or 3 little opportunities to come up for and share idea. So TED, the whole concept is about sharing, create different and genuine, that's not the word. Y'all know what I'm trying to say. Ideas worth sharing. That's their slogan. But I went up there and she said, give me 3 words. And I said, father-daughter healing. Popped off the top of my head. And she was like, huh. What would you like to talk about? And so I did this exercise with this woman. Her name is Heather. And fast forward to 3 weeks later, I get an email because I signed up for their, announcements. Get an email and they say applications are available. So then I found out it's an application process. Like, cool, I know how to fill out an application. Called Dad. I said, we need to sit together. I want to apply for this. I think the way that, for me, I recognize there are a lot of women and men who talk about their abuse, they talk about their survivor story, they share, there are a lot of opportunities. But for me, it was always about getting the male voice in an empowering way. Because unfortunately, and I'm not gonna deny for anyone whose biological father was their assailant or their perpetrator, that is even more terrible. But I also recognize that there are a lot of fathers that are not the perpetrator but don't have voices, don't know what to say, don't know how to feel. So I wanted to make sure from day one of my master's thesis, it was about his voice, my voice together. I knew that it would be a different idea. I knew that on a TED stage, this would be something completely different, new, inspiring, hopefully. That was the goal. And then they asked us the questions about how is it relevant. I think with the Me Too movement that is happening right now, all of this men and women coming forward about being assaulted by these men in power in politics, I was like, it's right on time. It's right on time. And then having a Black man's voice as a part of the healing conversation, I needed it to be on there, and we applied, sent in a video, and then a week or two later when they did the callback, we got a call and say we were accepted.
Yeah. Okay, now let's go to Atlanta. When you went to pick her up and you guys drove back across the country. Tell us about that journey.
Well, so I go down there, hang out for a minute. I think Mom's was still living down there, so we did a little whatever that is. But it's a family, good family. I'm not dogging nobody in absentia. And then she says, look, let's do this. Let's figure. So she tries to map it out. This is still a few years before GPS.
Okay.
It's really
We
like
had
the
old school. We had the TomTom. It was that big.
It
It looked like a TV with the back. It was just small on top of my car.
It was right. So so we didn't. I mean, we had AAA maps and so, but we just said let's try to do it so it's educational and joyful.
And you're how old at this time?
I was 31.
Okay.
Because we left. It was 2000. It started with in 2008. I wanted to move out of Atlanta. I had been there for 8 years. I'd finished grad school. I was actually on the tail end of finishing my thesis. I needed to defend it, but I knew I was done. And so 2011 is when we decided to take it.
And we did have this pattern of taking these little road trips. So we drove from Atlanta up to Obama's first inauguration together. You know, so we had this pattern of getting, and then all the way back, of course, when I drove cross country. So we said, let's go. We went to, Pensacola was it first? Wait a minute.
Alabama.
That's right, my bad. We just wanted to do something. We tried to go to the Civil Rights Museum, but they had stuff happening. We couldn't actually see it. But we just, what we wanted to do was get rhythm. See, my whole thing is to do fathers, black men who are fathers, black men who are lovers of their children. What they want to do, in my opinion, is create a rolling series of many rituals and ceremonies. Do little things that cumulatively build deep bonds. You know, so literally, for me, it started with doing her hair at 7. I didn't know how to braid hair.
Back to the trip for a minute. So
I'm sorry, I get excited.
Are there parts of discussions that you had that kind of stand out? That were there further breakthroughs that you remember?
I think for me, honestly, that's why we started with the victorizing. I mean, we're literally talking about why are we doing this work? And I said, we just need to victorize this situation. We cannot.
And she said,
Dad, victorize. What is victorize? I said, you're driving with a poet. So that's what we're going to do is make up some language. Because what it does is viscerally connect you with your vision. And what we had already known, she was already strong and well on her healing journey at this point. So we were now.
Let me ask you, at that point, because we talk about reclaiming your voice. Do you feel as if at 31, 9 years after the last experience, and whatever time the perpetrator had been in jail,
that's right.
Do you feel like you had reclaimed your voice at that point, or you were still in the process?
I definitely did. I know that I did. I reclaimed my voice. I felt strong. I felt like I was making decisions that were for my life versus just being in the emotions. I mean, my move to Atlanta was just to get away from DC for safety. I had a cousin there who was my rock, and she was like, come, no questions, you stay with me. And I stayed with her. So all of that, by 2011, I reclaimed my voice. I reclaimed my father. I mean, that was even me writing my thesis, going to grad school was about reclaiming myself because all through college and undergrad, my stepdad was all intertwined in that, psychologically telling me that I couldn't do certain things. You need me. I'll help you write this. I'll help you write that. So for me to be able to go to grad school and to graduate and to write something powerful and to write something with my biological, non-abusive father,
that's right.
I definitely reclaimed who I was, my voice, and was still, I mean, I still had a long journey to go. I'm 38 now, that was 31. I have had many of more growth in the past 8 years as well.
Well, remember when we was in New Orleans?
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden her neck started just locking up.
Yep, couldn't walk.
And because we were talking about things, talking about the deadline of the thesis, just the legacy of all this stuff, and we were walking, And she said, man, God damn, I can't. We found a massage therapist who just kinked it out.
Yeah.
But throughout the trip, as we got closer back to LA, that deadline started looming. We get all the way back home. We drove all the way to the 10, all the way through, which literally used to go right to the highway that led to my crib. We get to the joint the first day. She says, you know what, man, I don't know if I want to write this thesis.
Yep.
I don't know if I want to do this. And I looked at,
Why?
Yeah.
Why were you doubting?
Some same psychological fears. You get a tape that's playing over and over your head. I think a lot of survivors, we deal with that. Those self-doubt, those things that are like, if someone's constantly telling you, you ain't nothing, you can't do nothing, it takes a while to unravel that.
reprogram.
And even now, there are moments I'm like, oh, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. And I have to push through that. And that's a constant, that's why I even talk about in the TED Talk, it is a consistent lifestyle change. It is a constant renewing of your mind. So for me to get to the house, and I was like, I don't want to do this, because it took me, I was in a 2-year program. It took me 4 years to finish grad school. Hey, shout out to everybody who takes forever in grad school. But I realized the reason why. All my coursework was done, but that thesis, to write my story, to get that out, to have in the back of your mind, like for me, the demon telling me you can't do it. What? The evil person in my life telling me I can't write. You can't write. You're not a good writer. Even though I am the child of a prolific writer, but I can't write. And I remember that too. I got there, and you could tell them what you said.
She was in serious doubt, and you said what?
I said, let's take a break. Because as a writer, I know regular writer's block. But this kind of writer's block wasn't about writing at all. It was about, I'm right on the threshold. I call them crux moments. She's right at the crux. And she knew, because I had already told her, if we're going to do this together, then you're going to really have to dig in, because I don't play when it comes to writing. Because that's how I'm imprinted, by Sam Yet at Howard back in the 70s. When you get to that crux, I said, if you're going to be a writer, you don't stop when you get uncomfortable. That's when you dig in. Because that's where the real storytelling takes place. You know? And you know what we did, among other things? We went to the park. We took a walk. We went to the beach. And I said, just give yourself a couple of days. I said, if you, at the end of that couple of days, truly, absolutely can honestly say, you know what, Pops, I don't want to do this. I'm done. Just getting back together with you, that's really the thesis. Then I would say, Dap, love you, let's find some work so we can try to survive. But after a couple of days, she said, got it, let's go, pow. And we jumped in. People who read that thesis, and she can tell you how to get it, but it ain't no namaste in that thesis, bro.
That's kind of, oh,
we let it
raw.
go.
That's raw.
And then,
it was raw. It was. I mean, it's on multiple occasions, I'm reeling back from it. I mean, it was just like.
It's like it's kind of like
powerful,
like fire coming off of it. And when she finished it and turned it in, and then I started learning a little tech from her. I watched her defend her thesis using Skype. And she was killing it, and the professors was like, yeah, we glad. And they didn't really know how to answer or really engage with this, because they had never seen a conversation like this. And finally they turned to me and say, well, Mr. Harris, do you have anything to say? I was like, yeah, much, but let me just stay here and say, champion. Y'all got a champion.
So, Adenike, please stay right there and try to explain how that moment of power felt.
In my thesis, or like completing
when you were defending that thesis and rocking it?
It felt just magnificent. It felt really just good to not only have my story be done and told in its truest, rawest form. When I tell you, that's when I say now, I say I did anger. That was anger. That was getting out anything.
Anger. It was eloquent anger.
Thanks, Dad. No, but it was, because it wasn't just about the raw story, but it was really about relating my story to some literature. Like I had to do a lit review. I still had to do the formal, thesis work. But the power I felt in that room was because I'm using my story in an educational format.
Yeah.
To show, number one, you don't have to do it the one way that they tell you. I was able to use a creative format.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, you can do a creative thesis. So that allowed me to have another person's voice involved in it. But it was magnificent. I even remember in the room, one of my professors and my advisor, I think I can use the words now, I know them, but it's like I think I triggered in her her own abuse that we didn't even, nobody probably knew. Because she kept asking these questions and was like, well, what about the survivors whose fathers did it? You know, how is having his voice so important? And I said, well, no disrespect to individuals who've had that experience, but that's not my experience. And the purpose of his voice in this is to showcase a womanist approach, because that's what I use, the womanist point of view and a womanist theory in women's studies, to discuss the importance of male and female voices in moving forward and moving the movement forward. And I remember that day, because even later we talked about like, did she not like it? What was, and I said, I don't know, she was a little rough. But it was just powerful to be able to emphasize the importance of my dad's voice, my own story, and then using it in a field that like, I just still to this day believe male, female voices have to be heard and working together to have progress.
I'm so curious about what part of this experience triggered the greatest amount of rage within you. Was it sometime during the victimization? Was it sometime after you had reclaimed your power? Do you know when you felt the greatest amount of rage about the violation?
I think when I was 18 or 19 was when I was the most rageful and angry, because if you read a thesis, you can go into those details, but part of my ex-stepfather's, I didn't even want to say it, effing rationale was preparation, right? Like when you get a boyfriend, you'll know what to do, you blah, 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 all of that. So in my mind, I go to college, some sick demented,
criminal.
Yes,
behavior.
definitely.
Okay.
So in my childish mind of thinking if this is what I'm being told, I did what I know in psychology is known as disassociation, and I reprocessed things, went to college, got me a little boyfriend. I'm good. You now can leave me alone.
Right.
And when that didn't happen is when my rage kicked in.
When he didn't leave you
when
alone.
He didn't leave me
home.
alone. Because it was like, you made it, and then that's when it started to kick in for me, that was where that rage was, that's where that fight was. And then I remember the words I said to him, if you ever touch me again, I'll kill you. And I remember that. I said that to him. And then that's
Did he
when
react?
He didn't. It was the moment of like, for him, I think it was a moment of like, oh. Now that was at like 19, so from 19 to 22, it was a battle within myself of reverting back to being a child, reverting back to pushing and being, he didn't violate me anymore, but then it became, and again, this is not new if you read my thesis.
Sure.
But it went into sexual favors. It came into him asking for like, I need this. Like it is the epitome of what they discuss in psychology as grooming, all of those things that twine you up into the manipulation, the ultimate manipulation. That even though I was enraged and was feeling stronger in myself, it wasn't enough yet. And it wasn't enough until that day I told you.
Because there's something about you still at that point that was serving, that was giving as a result of what the previous conditioning had been.
Exactly. Like even at college, I had a friend of mine who I just saw recently. We went to college together, and she knew my stepdad, and she had met him before. And she even told me, she said, she's known of this for a while because she was a part of my healing circle, and she knew of this. But then as she's gotten more details, she's just like, I always thought it was weird that he would come to visit you at camp, like he was too present at school to be like a dad. And she was like, I thought it was cool. He was at all your track meets. He was there. But she was like, but then I thought it was really effing weird. And I was like,
Okay, so you guys went to his trial? Was it just the sentencing?
Yeah, it was a sentencing hearing
Yeah.
because he finally admitted guilt. For about 6 months, though, it was a consistent, like, I'm innocent. But when it got uncovered that he was a serial perpetrator in New York, he had violated 2 other girls who were 14 or 15 years old.
Yeah.
It was one of those, I think his defense lawyer was like, you got to do it. So we went there.
Both of you care to weigh in where here is someone who is denying their culpability and what that did to each of you?
Well, I watched her testify against him, and I just, that was the rage point, first off, to answer that question.
For you?
Sure,
Yeah.
I'm sitting in there. But I want to say also that the thing that I want to say to my brothers is be careful how you live your life in a family. Be careful that you don't hold drama, for example. Don't be in a tango with your ex over children's rights. And, because what are you doing? If you aren't breaking circuits, if you aren't figuring out a way to say, nope, we can't be together, but we got to recreate the most secure home environment for our young people, so that if anything comes up, let's say you're the greatest dude in life, and let's say Mom's is a great person, but she meets somebody new.
Yeah.
If y'all haven't done your work, you create silences. And for me, the thing is, I now see that in my own way, I'm not taking her mom's weight, but I can see in my own way, by me continuing to debate to low-level distaste and disregard, all the way into college. You know, I kept participating. I don't know if I could have actually chopped, once this dude got involved, because he was such a master predator, but once, if I had been able to break those circuits, even with the physical distance, I know she would have told me some stuff, because we had already, I had raised her. You know what I mean? I had raised her sister and had raised her brother. And I was a good father. See, this is what I want to make sure is clear. And I spent time making sure when we worked on the thesis and when we started about the TED Talk, I said, let's make sure we're telling people I am the non-abusive father.
Not creating silences.
Absolutely.
Man, that's
and sometimes
special.
Sometimes it's gross, like I hate you, I don't never want to talk to you again. That's a silence. We're actually quite easy. We can rumble with that. I'm talking about these more sophisticated silences. So that as your kids grow into new seasons of life, it's one thing when she was 7. She'd say, Dad, oh, something ain't right. That's a different thing than somebody in their teens, in their early 20s. And so you got to grow too. You got to grow. And you got to grow for the positive reason.
And you're talking about the parenting piece right now. And Adenike, you say something in the talk where how a victim like yourself has difficult dynamics beyond regular dating, where you have lived something that triggers emotions, that triggers reactions, and when you try to be transparent and tell the individual that you're dating what you're going through, they say, when you gonna get over that stuff? And you say to, the men that are looking here, what?
Don't say that.
Don't say that.
Don't say that. Hold space. Recognize you may not have an answer. You may not even know what to do with it, but that's okay too. Dad was talking about creating silences, but sometimes a peaceful silence
Yeah.
between two loved ones is okay. If your partner is feeling vulnerable enough and safe enough with you to even share these details, then honor it by just saying thank you. Thank you for trusting me with your vulnerability and sharing this with me. And then honor your own self of feeling what you're feeling. I don't really know what to do with this. I don't know what this is making me feel. I might have to process it too, but thank you. You don't take it away. You don't take away from the woman who's sharing with you or your partner that's sharing with you. You do recognize that it's been brought to the room, but you don't tell nobody to get over it. You don't ask them like, okay, well, how long are you gonna be dealing with this? This is like, it's embedded in you. It unfortunately becomes a part of your DNA. Doesn't have to limit you, you know, and I say this to my survivors, doesn't have to limit you. It doesn't have to take you away from wanting to be with someone or wanting to date and be intimate, but you have to understand it. That's why I talk all about, it's about your own healing. You have to know your triggers. You have to know what things will or will not work for you sexually or intimately. If holding hands ain't your thing, you got to understand that. That could be it. So,
when you say embedded in you, that means it's there.
It's there.
It's there.
Yeah.
And for the rest of your life,
Yeah.
you just have to manage it.
Yeah, and I would use the word manage, but use that lightly. I would use it like you have to be aware of it. You have to consciously know that this is something that is in you and just take care of it. That's why I don't like for me, manage gives this connotation that you just got to deal with it and you put it somewhere. You have to take care of it. You don't have to nurture it in a sense so that it grows and blooms, but you got to nurture it in a sense that this happened to you. It's like your inner child. If you were a child, your little kid in you is going to be hurt. So you have to make sure that you acknowledge you're hurt, but you're not going to lead the way anymore. I'm not going to be a child. I'm going to be an adult. I'm going to grow. I'm going to heal. But you take care of it. You nurture it. You acknowledge it. You know that it's in you, but then you do the work. And I think that's what Dad and I both agree on. Do the work, whatever that means for you. And that's a lot of what I wanted to emphasize in the talk. It's like, this is not for everybody.
Understood.
This is not for me.
Ain't gonna happen.
Ain't gonna happen, you know? But you know what can work for you. And then you figure that out and you decide this way works for me, that's not gonna work for me. Some people can't do talk therapy because unfortunately, their therapist is the one who assaulted them. It could have been as a teenager, that happened to them. So their mind in relation to what therapy is gonna be like, no, I'm not going there. Some people can't go to church and do spiritual counseling because it was the priest or the pastor that assaulted them. So that's not gonna work for you. But find what works for you and figure that out and process that and be there. And then when you find a partner, since you're talking about, you know, what to say to guys, find a partner that can understand that and then work with them and make sure that they are a part of that as well as a non-abusive loved one.
Pete, what works for guys? What's let's talk. Let's talk about us weak ones, because this right here is a champ and a giant of giants.
Well, I'm lucky. So I had 7 to 10 men who have been in my world as friends, my two big brothers. And you know they're radically different personality types. And both of them showed up. Both of them showed up to the hearing, for example. They came to her graduation. I needed them. I said, man, you know, I don't want to go up here by myself, because all that drama was still low level. They drove from Maryland up to wherever, Mount St. Mary's College, and was there. And they were like the fruit of Islam, quiet, big old, because they were just present. So I start with Glenn and Ron, and honestly. But I have friends, some of whom I go all the way back to my 20s, who walked with me, who talked with me, who listened, who let me stay over their cribs, who kept saying, bro, I feel it all in their own way, but don't, walk with her. Just walk with her. We don't know, because I say aloud, if you think you know what you're gonna do in advance, you're not really ready for anything.
Yes.
Because plus or minus.
Yeah.
If you already got it mapped out, you're a robot. But if you stay supple, then you know who your friends are and you walk with them. There was no way. If you'd have told me somebody gonna hurt my knucklehead, or I would have told you in advance what I was gonna do.
Sure, of course.
It happens.
Of course. You got to deal with the moment.
Got to get it right where it is at the real time.
Right. Adenike and Pete, I cannot thank you enough for coming here. Man, I started this show wanting to help change our narrative from this little slice of the world. What you're doing takes a lot of courage and a lot of love. And I'm telling you, I am honored that both of you sat here and shared with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
so much.
Appreciate you.
Folks, and thank you for joining us this evening. For more information on this program or any other program produced by WHUT, go to WHUT.org. God bless, goodbye, and keep the faith.
This program was produced by WHUT, Howard University Television, and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.